Hey everybody, welcome back to All Fiction is Fantasy. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to review Necroscope Book 2, Vamphyri, written by Brian Lumley and originally published in 1988. So this review will be broken up into two parts. The first will be a general synopsis with my non-spoiler thoughts on the book, and the second part will be a more detailed discussion with spoilers, because it's impossible to critique the book without getting into the nitty-gritty, gooey, gory details. So let's go into part one. First thing we'll do is read the back of the book here. Death is not the end. Not the end of life, Harry Keogh discovered, and not the end of his battle against the terrible evil of the vampires. In a secluded English village, Julian Bodescu plots his takeover of the world. Imbued with a vampire's powers before his birth, Bodescu rules men's minds and bodies with supernatural ease. He is secretly creating an army of vampiric monsters, things that once were men, but now are walking masses of destructive hunger. Harry Keogh, Necroscope, thought that the war with the vampires had ended with the destruction of Boris Dragosani and of Harry's body. But the man who talks to the dead lives on, more powerful than ever, able to transport himself instantly to any spot on the globe and to speak mind to mind with both the living and the dead. Are Harry's new powers enough to defeat Julian Bodescu and his legion of monsters, or will the vampire army overrun the living earth? Vamphyri, second in a powerful trilogy of terror. So overall, I enjoyed Book 2 of the Necroscope series a little bit more than Book 1. Once again, as I mentioned in my video for Book 1, this is a reread. I've read the first 3 of this series, and this is a reread for me. And I really did enjoy my time with Necroscope Book 2. It's more interesting in its plotting and structure, and it more fully embraces its elements of horror. It works on 2 different levels of horror. On one level, there are the elements of the gothic horror found in the flashbacks, where we learn about the history of one of the main vampires, complete with treks through mountain passages to old castles, through creepy terrain and stormy weather. Those flashbacks are kind of a more prototypical Dracula-like vampire story. On the other level, the flashbacks are told in tandem with a more modern tale of horror, in which one of the new vampires is turning his immediate family into a small army of the undead, using a farmhouse as a house of torture, a place of bloodlust, and general debauchery. These parts were my favorite parts of the novel. They're really gruesome, and the main vampire villain is pretty cool and he's pretty evil, and I liked his conniving, and I liked the way that he was creating his house of horrors there in the English countryside. The book has a more interesting structure than the first book. It feels more adventurous in its plotting and in the way that the story is told. It's generally more exciting throughout. However, I do think that books 1 and 2 could actually be made much better if their contents were combined and then re-edited into 2 different volumes. A lot of the time we spend in Book 2 is actually spent learning about characters from Book 1. And by re-editing the contents of each into 2 different volumes, the same content could be combined in a more compelling way. Lumley is really good at beginnings and endings, but I think he struggles with middles. This is true of Book 1, and it is also true of Book 2. Like Book 1, Vamphyri, Book 2 of the Necroscope series, has an incredibly awesome ending that left me super excited to continue the series. Okay, so now we're into part 2, and this is going to get more into the details, and this is where the spoilers will start. So one of the main issues with this series so far is that it does lack an interesting and compelling protagonist and antagonist. After 2 books of a trilogy, we should be fully aware of who the main antagonist is and what their plan is. What are the good guys fighting against? In the Necroscope series, we only have a more general idea, a vague notion of the evil of the vampires. We don't really have a central antagonistic point of view character, and after almost 1,000 pages, that can be an issue. We are also stuck with a somewhat uninteresting main character in Harry Keogh, Necroscope. At the end of book 1, Keogh's spirit is torn, is separated from his mutilated body. He's basically dead in body form. And he finds himself trapped in the Mobius continuum in this other dimension. This is both interesting and somewhat problematic. It's interesting and actually a bit brave on Lumley's part because our main hero is really just a ghost that is having to communicate to the world of the living through the innate psychic powers of his own newborn child. Harry can possess his infant son, and he uses his son's innate powers to remain in communication with Alec, Kyle, and other psychic agents of the E branch. This is kind of a brave move by Lumley, but it also creates a kind of uninteresting protagonist. Because for 95% of this novel, Keogh does almost nothing. For most of the novel, Hero's only role is that of a listener, as he is being told a story of the vampire's history and he is gaining information. But because he's trapped as a spirit in another dimension, he can't really take any actions. And so we're stuck with an inactive protagonist. The story told in parallel to Keogh's is interesting, but it suffers from a lack of characterization of the main players. Keogh is feeding information to Alec Kyle, who is working with other agents of the Russian espionage branch to destroy an evil vampire in the bodily form of Julian Bodescu. Towards the end of the novel, we are treated to an amazing siege sequence in which various psychic agents of the E branch attack the Bodescu farm at his home compound. However, these various agents are really nothing more than a name and a superpower. We spend a lot of time reading about characters we don't really know anything about doing all the cool stuff, while the characters we do know about, the characters we do care about, are either trapped in another dimension or trapped in a Russian compound, both unable to do anything proactive. It's very odd. It's one of the few books I've ever read where the main characters don't actually have a huge impact on the outcome of the action. However, I think the book is entertaining enough that that problem doesn't become detrimental. It is instead an interesting choice that Lumley makes. I think it was attempting to show that the central conflict is bigger than any of the two heroes, but I'm not sure if he totally solved that in a satisfactory way. But overall, I did really enjoy book 2 of Necroscope. I think it's pretty interesting. There are a lot of creative ideas flowing throughout, creative reimaginations of the vampire mythos, and I like how he ties in this kind of cosmic horror into a more kind of traditional Dracula style horror, a gothic style horror story. I think it sets up a great finale that is concluded in Necroscope Book 3. And if I remember correctly, Necroscope Book 3, the source, is the one that I liked the most out of these original 3 books from Brian Lumley. And of course, on the table here, you're going to be seeing a lot of Brian Lumley on the channel in the future. We've got Hero of Dreams, Ship of Dreams, Elysia, The Mad Moon of Dreams, Beneath the Moors, The House of Cthulhu, and other tales of the primal land. And there's going to be a lot more Brian Lumley on All Fiction is Fantasy. So all right, you guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this review of Vamphyri, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.